Coach, when you hear about the old Boise State offense, what is it that comes to mind when you think of the old Boise State offense?
Oh, shoot, I think there was always a constant evolution of, what the Boise State offense is. I don't think there's necessarily a new and old, retro offense. I think just, I think Boise State offensively has just always been on the cutting edge, when you look back at it. And, obviously the offense that I played in, that when I was here in the 2004 time period, which is the one I obviously know the best, having been in it full time and been gone for 10 years since that, it was dedicated to getting a physical ground game going, being able to establish the run, hitting your shots down the field, utilize, creativity, utilize motions and shifts and uncharacteristically normal formations and sets and, the creativity part. So I think that, that's been a staple of offensive football around here for a long time, and, I don't think that's going to change anytime soon.
Do you think that we'll see more of that this year than maybe we saw last year? And obviously you weren't here last year, but are you trying to get back to that offense? I know it's probably changed since '04.
Yeah.
Are you trying to get back to something that looks similar to that?
Yeah. I think that's, I think we have both Coach Harsin and myself, have a lot of background. Obviously Coach Harsin a lot more so than myself in that, that brand of the offense. And, but Coach Harsin himself, he went out and evolved. I obviously, was exposed to quite a bit offensively at different places that I've been, and kind of Coach Harbaugh's brand of the West Coast offense, and Coach Shaw's brand of the West Coast offense, and then a couple places in between. And so I think that kind of just being able to get all those things, and kind of molded together in one unique system. I think that's going to be what we're going to be known as, and I think there's a lot of unknowns about that in terms of what the public knows and obviously what our opponents know, and that's not a bad thing. But I think internally we know what our DNA is, in our offense, and we're looking forward to going out and executing at a high level. And it was a really good training camp.
At any point, is it too much for the players? I mean, if you have elements of so many different things, how long does it take players to kind of process that?
Well, I think the answer to that question is as long as your terminology remains consistent in how you call plays. Sorry about that. Let me get you there on the backhand. But as long as your terminology has consistency and you're not trying to call things by different systems, and that's what we've done a good job of here is bringing together different worlds, but really putting it into terminology that the players here have either some background with already when we got here, or just to come in and try to have a system to why we call things the way we do. And that was actually when I first got here. There were really two kind of different, unique terminology systems that were in place. And since that time, 10, 15 years ago, we've done a good job of making it more consistent across the board and not have the NFL numbering system for half of our offense and then the other West Coast offensive terminology with tags and phrases for the other half. So I think terminology and consistency has made it so it's very much an offense that these guys can digest and apply at a full speed level.
Less than a week to go before the start of the season. What do you think will be the strength of the offense?
I think our playmakers. I think we have some established playmakers that we're going to rely on. There's no question, and those guys are going to be Jay for sure, Matt Miller, Shane Williams-Rhodes, Grant Hedrick, guys that have made plays in games. Because at the end of the day, guys that have field credibility at this time, and when you're going in with that anxiety about who's going to show up and who's going to the moment might be big for them, but you can rely on those guys early on, and get those guys the ball early on. So I think those guys are going to be, at least early on in terms of actually being out in the field and playing in game situations. They'll be guys that we rely on. They'll be strengths of our offense, and then on the offensive line, relying on a guy like Marcus, and Marcus is a guy that he's the bus driver. He's taking us to the promised land. We're going to, the offensive line's going to follow him, and he's going to make the calls. And but he's a guy who's played. He has field credibility, and so those are things that I think are going to be staples. In our offense is relying on the experienced playmakers, relying on those guys that have been in the trenches before. And then, the great thing is that we're going to have a bunch of new players that are, on the offensive line, backup tailbacks, receivers that haven't played, they have no field credibility at this point. They're going to grow their field credibility as the season goes on, and then those guys start to emerge. So, the good thing is that it's still football. It's just football. These guys have been playing it. I think if you guys have been to our practices, I think we simulate a very intense game-like atmosphere as much as I've ever been around. And so those guys have been with their feet to the fire, and I think that the way we practice and the way that we go about operating at practice, I think really lends itself to guys feeling ready to play.
Some of those other guys at number 3 receiver, you have Burrows or Anderson listed. How do you see that number 3 receiver situation playing out?
I think it's a good problem to have, that we have a couple of oars listed. And, some places that can be a negative thing. I think that both of those guys, or Troy Ware, coming back when he was banged up, I think those guys have given us something that we want to give them in the game. So they've given us something throughout training camp, to feel like we want to give these guys an opportunity to do something. So how that's going to play out, I think it's going to be somewhat play specific, and we'll utilize those guys in their strengths, and utilize those guys to hopefully create some mismatches and get the ball moving in the right direction.
What about at number 2 running back? You have Demas or Fields.
Same thing, same thing. Both of those guys have shown some stuff. I mean, Devin Demas has had just a great camp. He had a really good, cap to spring ball, and really his arrows have just been pointing up because, he's a guy that can run in between the tackles, but he also has some legitimate speed. And then Jack Fields is, you feel really good about just putting him out there and being able to do stuff for us and be the complete back as well. So both those guys have had a good, good camp, and I think both of them give you something a little bit unique. But they both are you feel really good about those top 3 backs, which is good going into a season.
Having gone through a spring ball and a fall camp with Grant Hedrick, what do you expect out of him his senior year?
I think Grant's just been, he's been so efficient. The guy, he just didn't, he's been stingy with the football, which was a huge, emphasis going into this year for our whole offense, but particularly with him. Ball security as a runner, being stingy with the football in the passing game. And so I think I've been just really impressed with his ability to go through his reads. The guy can get to his 3rd, 4th read now, and I think he's made a lot of progress in that area. And I think the thing for him, this is his first time obviously going in as the starter at the beginning of the season, and he's prepared for it. And he's done a great job of going about his business in a way that a starting quarterback at a major program would do. And I've been very impressed with him. And that position group, I've really enjoyed working with them. They're all about ball, and they love football. They love the meeting room atmosphere. They love understanding the whys of what we do. And Grant kind of spearheads that group right there. Where
do you expect the most growth out of him going? They say kind of taking the experience he had last year and going with it this year.
I think the biggest growth that he'll have is just his overall understanding of what we're doing and what from last year to this year. I can't speak to that. I didn't sit in those meeting rooms, but in terms of evaluating the film, I think that Grant has the ability to get through his reads, through his entire progression, and we're getting as many reps at practice as I've ever been around. And it's funny because, you think about it, you guys might be a little bit gassed in the middle of camp, and it was a tough camp. It was a good camp. And to come out of it was healthy, as healthy as we did was awesome. But the biggest byproduct that you get out of that is your quarterbacks just get tons of work at different looks and going through the same progression against multiple looks, and our defense gives us so many different looks. And I feel really good about those guys, just in terms of the amount of reps that they've gotten, and feeling really good about our concepts and being able to call stuff and just let him go out and execute it and get through his progression. Maybe the number 1 that we're trying to dial up's not there. I feel confident Grant not trying to force number 1, that he can get to number 2. Oh shoot, they took away number 2. Now let me find my check down, or let me take off and run as my 4th, whatever it may be. Every play is unique.
How much are you going to lean on his legs?
And the thing about his legs, when you look at the Russell Wilsons, you look at even Johnny Manziel, you look at those kind of guys, a lot of that stuff isn't necessarily designed. So that's one of those deals that I think you're excited as a coordinator, and obviously as his position coach. On game day, you get to actually see that come to fruition, because now you get to take off and run, as opposed to trying to go through your progressions and find the checkdowns every time. But now you get to see, this guy can take off and run if something's not there that we call up, and he's been practicing that. But you don't see that, in a practice environment. It seems like the defense got you. Well, you still might have 15, 20, 25 yards on the end of that play if you take off and run.
What about you personally? When you're writing out the script of plays and stuff, knowing you're going to be the one calling it and making this game plan, and just your first time getting a chance to call plays as a coordinator. How exciting is that?
It's really exciting, and it actually does remind me a little bit. My first time being in a similar role was at Western Kentucky. And we opened up at Nebraska, and it was coming off of one of the best defensive years, and they had NFL players up and down their defensive roster, and we, playing in their stadium there, which is just a ruckus environment. And you're up there in the press box, and you call your first 3rd and 8, and you're like, whoa, this is a big deal. It's a fun deal. And we got our first 3rd, and I think it was 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8. We got it going, and then all of a sudden you're like, okay, we're rolling. And so it's really there's a little anxiety that's going to set in, of course, leading up to it. But once you get in the flow of the game, you feel good, and you've been around this game for a long time. Myself, been around the game my entire life, and you know the situations, and you feel confident in your preparation.
Do you script out a set of 5, 10, 15 plays, or you just the first one and see what happens and go from
No,
there?
yeah, we'll have a pretty good plan in terms of how we open the game. But that's always subject to change based on the situation. So you can never completely script plays, because you might start backed up. You might start out in the red zone. So you're going to have to be able to adapt quickly. But Coach Harsin and all the different scrimmage situations has recreated all of those situations at any given time, and give us some sudden change opportunities to kind of shift your paradigm a little bit to be able to call it from a different perspective than maybe you saw it going. And I think that really helps you out as a play caller. And he's been through it, so he's helped. He's really assisting me in that area.
You going to be on the field or in the box?
I'll be up in the box.
What what do you rely on the other guys for on that offensive staff during a game to make sure you're doing what you need to be doing up there?
Well, you just need great eyes. You need guys that see stuff well. Coach Huff, obviously knowing the run game inside and out. I'll be talking to him consistently in between series, which will be nice, because all the scrimmage situations, you don't have a chance to make any adjustments. You're just going fast, and then all of a sudden you scored a touchdown. You don't have a chance to talk about the previous drive. You got to lead your second group down fast. So you don't really have that dialogue quite as much, which will be nice, because we'll have a chance to kind of hit the reset button, gather our thoughts, and make the adjustments that you need to make. In a scrimmage, you don't have a chance to do that. You're calling football plays that you think are going to be good versus what our defense does, but this is going to be a lot more regimented to what we're trying to get to, and then have the adjustments built in between series. And then Coach Drinkwitz, he's a guy that just has coordinated himself at a couple different levels. So he's a good, really one. He'll be sitting right next to me up there in the box, and obviously he and I have a great, we have a really, really good relationship, and I really trust him. And he always has really good input when asked, and I've already used him. We moved him up to the box this fall camp in some of the situations, and he's done an excellent job. And then Coach Adams, Coach Adams does a great job as a receiver coach, being on the field, kind of managing the psyche of the offense down on the sideline, and having that cool, calm demeanor when you need it, when the situation might be big, and get those guys back to, hey, let's get back to executing, and then we might need a swift kick in the pants to get the energy up, and he'll handle that really well. And I really like our offensive staff. And then Coach Riddle, he's always, he's going to manage a lot of the overall game situations alongside Coach Harsin. And then Coach Harsin will be obviously extremely involved in the overall management of the game and the offense. And he and I obviously will be dialoguing the entire game.
How much when you're in the box, you're going to have to pay attention to where Kimdichie is, or Pruitt, or some of their, you mentioned your playmakers, but their playmakers?
Well, you got to account for those guys, man. Those two guys are outstanding players. Shooting 94 gross is about as good of a nose tackle, getting off the ball as you can find. So you got to account for those guys. They're guys that they've earned their stripes in the best league in college football up there with the Pac-12. I'd say two of them are the top two leagues. Coach Shaw would get mad at me if I said that was the best league. I think they're both pretty good. But they've earned their stripes in that league, and you just watch those guys, and for whatever reason, the ball just consistently finds Pruitt. It's just tip balls, breaking on balls. That guy's he's a ball hawk. He's a great football player. Ton of respect for him. It's a great challenge to play against players like that, but it's also it's good for your football team to point out a guy. Hey, this is a guy that you want to play the game like. With a great instinct for the ball, and you can tell that he's a guy that puts a lot of time into studying and preparing, and so you got to account for those guys. From up in the box, there's times where you're just calling plays. Obviously you've game planned for them to be in certain situations, and they might change at the last second, and it is what it is. And you train your quarterback to be able to adjust on the fly and make his reads and get through his progressions. And in the run game, our offensive line, they've blocked a multitude of looks throughout camp, so they'll have a chance to do some things for us on the field.
Where is Ryan Finley in terms of being game ready to go out there if you need him to?
He's ready. He's absolutely ready, and he's been in a lot of situations. I mean, he's been facing our first string defense pretty consistently in all the scrimmages that the public's seen, and he's done a nice job. He's led some touchdown drives, and he's a very intellectual young man. I mean, he's a guy that cares about the game a ton. I really like the combination of he and Grant and even Tommy in that room, just kind of what their personalities and their preparation, they kind of complement each other well. They're all different personality-wise. They all bring a different, unique skill set to the position, but I really, as a quarterback coach, I love when you have a full group that you feel good about, that you want to develop, and you don't want just your starter to be ready, because we all know you're one play away. And shoot, I spent a good chunk of my career being one play away, so I know what goes into that, that position, and you want to feel prepared. There's nothing worse than knowing you're one play away and you're like sitting there, oh gosh, there goes Dinwiddie, just got dinged, oh man, I didn't take any reps this week, here we go. So you want those guys to be completely dialed into what we're doing, and I tell all those guys, prepare like you're the starter, and they have. And I'm encouraged by that.
Do you wait for a mop-up situation, or do you need to force him out there for a series somewhere and just get him some experience so that he's ready?
I think you somewhat got to play that by ear, just by the situation. Obviously, if you have a guy that's a really unique skill set guy that's different than your starter, then I think you do have to get him into the situation where they're playing. But I think both those guys run well, they both throw well, they both go through progressions well. So it's not Grant is our starter. He's going to be the guy, and I think Finley does a lot of really good things as well. But I think they both have similar skill sets, even though they're built completely differently.
Obviously, Ole Miss has a strong D line. How do you like where the offensive line is at right now? I know you have one or spot on there on the line, but how do you look at the O line from what you've seen?
So much better. It's from the spring. Especially when you look at scrimmage situations, we've given up more sacks than we'd like to, but I think a lot of that had more to do with kind of the mismatches that might have been with the second O-line versus the first string defense, and bringing all kinds of different pressures and a bunch of guys that hadn't played a ton together, and that's what happens with the second string offensive line. A lot of times you're shuffling guys around. Feel good about the starters, and I feel good about the ongoing competition between Yaku and Archie. And then I also feel good about the position versatility that those guys give you. Archie played left tackle the whole spring, so now he's battling at right guard. So you feel good about having 5, 6, 7 guys that you feel like can plug and play in different positions. Marcus is always going to be a guy that can fill in at a guard. I like where that group's at, and I think Coach Huff, that guy does an unbelievable job preparing guys, because he's a very smart football coach and very technically sound football coach, but he's been in this situation many times as a coach and obviously as a player, and he's getting those guys ready to play.
Shane was telling us that he doesn't expect to get to 77 catches again this year just because of the way he's going to be used, and a lot of his catches last year were like at the line. How do you see his role being this year?
We got to give him the ball. Shoot. If he gets the ball 44 times and he doubles his yards, I'll be happy. If he gets the ball 77 times or 78 or 9, I'll be happy. We got to give him the ball. He's a guy that needs to touch the ball. And a lot of his touches last year, I think, were it's not always designed strictly to go to him. It's in reaction to what the defense gives you. And so they were giving out a lot of those bubble screens. They were giving them last year, and so a lot of those are sideways plays that get you plus yardage. And I think he's a guy that's shown that he can be at least what I've seen in the time I've been here, he can play receiver. He's not just purely a slot bubble guy. He can play receiver, and he's done a good job of that all camp. Did a good job in the spring, shown good catch versatility. Be able to make the tough catch in traffic. Be able to, he's got really good catch range. His radius to catch the football is a lot more so than you think when you look at that. That height and weight number. I mean, he's got the ability to go out and make a play.
Wednesday night, when you're getting ready, are you going to be running through your play sheet, or what's your kind of how do you get yourself ready? Make sure you're ready to call the plays and sort of in your groove when the game starts on Thursday.
Well, I think the biggest thing is that a lot of preparation's already gone towards that plan to this point. We still got another 4 really good solid 4 days to solidify the game plan, but a lot has gone in. We feel really good about where we're at right now, and we're getting a lot of repetitions, just like camp. We're getting a lot of repetitions at what we're going to do against these guys. So, I think you just have to have a little peace the night before a game, and knowing that you did everything you could do to prepare your team. And really, ultimately, it's about our players. It's about the great saying is that players make plays and players win games, and we do as coaches. We do our best job to put the best guys in position to make those plays for us. And we got to trust them on game day. And of course, I'm gonna put those guys, and with the help of our offensive staff, with the help of Coach Harsin throughout the course of the game, we're going to make the adjustments that we need to make to consistently get those guys to football.
You peel the paint off the walls in the press box, or you just go into a shell when things don't work, or what do you do up there?
It's funny. I've been around all different types, and being on the headsets with Coach Pete was pretty awesome for as a signaler, playing quarterback on the headsets. But I try to maintain calm, and I think. that's one thing I bring to the table. I've been around this game for a long time. I try to maintain my poise regardless of what's going on, and we always talk to our players about having a one play at a time mentality. Well, as a coordinator, you have to have the same mentality, or other guys are going to feed off of your panic. And so I mean that's legitimate. I've been around some coaches that do panic in those situations, and you have to trust your plan, trust your preparation, and obviously the chips are going to fall where they may. But we've put a lot of work into preparing to get to this point, and then we trust the plan. Our players trust the plan, and got to cut them loose and let them play.
Where did you? Which terminology did you use? I mean, did you bring your terminology, or did you modify it to what they had here, or was it the same?
Yeah, I'd say within the structure of the Boise State terminology, which is probably a good chunk of what I was exposed to, we more brought in maybe some terms that were used at different places, but then put them into the structure of terminology that Boise State's used historically, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
So there might be a couple names that were used at other places, and we might use those names. We had to come up with a new name because of, it might sound like something else that we already have in place. So trying to keep the consistency for these guys of what they've known in the past and what this offense has done.
Last one.